Welcome back to another episode of Life After Corporate, my friend. And if you're new to our show, welcome home. This is where you get to be seen in a virtual sense, heard by way of bringing our guests to you who are solving the most pressing challenges that you're facing right now as you traverse this identity shift from being a corporate leader to an entrepreneur. And today we're going to talk about how you can learn to trust yourself by trusting your intuition. And as a corporate leader, your analytical skills were on hyperdrive. You have executive function that would win major awards. But in entrepreneurship, things aren't so straightforward. And sometimes you can't think your way out of a challenge. So today we're talking to Shoshanna French. Her goal is to cultivate wildly successful leaders through the practical application of intuitive leadership. As the founder of Simple Spirit and Shoshanna French Consulting, she has been a coach to NFL leaders, Broadway and television stars, million and billion dollar business founders, CEOs, and business professionals. She helps her clients strengthen connection to their inner guidance so that they can make faster, smarter decisions in business and in life. Her clients generate unpredictable and profound results while deepening their connection to their purpose and finding new confidence and clarity. Welcome to Life After Corporate, Shoshanna French.
Thanks, Deb. I'm excited to have this conversation. It feels like it's in the air, especially with so much uncertainty in general, right? It's like, how do we just trust ourselves? Period. The end. Not
Yeah,
even
period, the
like
end.
over.
Not even in business, but just in life in general in these times. And I'm really thrilled to be having this conversation with you right now. And before we dive into trust, intuition, how to balance all the things, let's hear about you. I'm super curious in hearing your life after corporate story, if you even have one. Were you ever in corporate? I've never asked you that
Yeah.
question, I don't think.
Yeah. So when I graduated college, I got a job right out of college with something called Manpower. I don't know if it exists
Oh my
anymore.
God, I remember that.
Okay. So with Manpower, and I worked for an insurance company, like we were going through old files, and I got out of that job and then got put in a department where all we did was listen to complaints of people for Pacific Care Insurance, which doesn't exist anymore. Listen to complaints of providers who had not been paid. So that was my first corporate job out of college.
How
And
uplifting.
I mean, really, all you did was get yelled at all the time, but it taught me a lot about corporation and the what I would call, like, the picadillos, right? Like, the funny little quirky things that, to me, didn't make any sense, but that's the way they're done because that's the structure of corporate. So, it was like my job was this one specific thing, however, I could serve people if I did more, and I did more, and I'd get in trouble. So I'm kind of like, I don't know if I belong in this, kind of place. And then I went from there and then worked for, went from very, very, very corporate, very large. It was a, global insurance company with, hundreds of thousands of employees and, people that had that insurance right into kind of like personal development for an international company. And that was, it was a little like, because it was personal and professional development and like transformational education, it was a little less corporate-y
Mhm.
than an insurance company, but still, large company. And there were a lot of rules and regulations. And I was there for a while, led programs for them and worked on staff for them and realized pretty quickly that I did not, I did not fit such a rigid structure. I do not do well in such rigidity. So I was only there for a very short amount of time. And then, as lots of entrepreneur stories probably go, I bounced around in a few jobs and then found myself in a group where they were talking about starting businesses.
Mhm.
And I was like, hmm, why not? Let's try that.
Yeah, let's try that next.
Yeah. And it's funny because entrepreneurship has some flexibility that's inherent, but it is business. So business does require a certain amount of, repetition and, structure. And
Yeah.
that part is always the part in 20 years now in business is always the part I have found to be particularly challenging.
Yeah. And I always say, if you have the right structure, there's infinite freedom within structure, but without any structure, there's like chaos.
Yeah.
You need your own guardrails, even if you're setting them up. So let's dive into this conversation. I'm curious, like how you came to intuitive leadership as your calling? Like, did you try other things along the way, or, did this just hit you with a lightning bolt and, oh, I need to teach people how to use their intuition? What was your journey?
Uh, so this is gonna for most people listening, they're gonna go, "This sounds really nonlinear," and
Mhm.
it is because I'm intuitively led in just about every area of life, and so this is very nonlinear. So it's going to sound that way, and I say that. So then people are like, "This is a very strange story." Yes, yes, it is. This is a strange story. So originally, when I started my business, I was a psychic and I did psychic readings and I would meet people at coffee shops. And then this opportunity came to be in the paper locally where I live in Denver, Colorado. And it blew my business, like it blew me up popularity wise. Like I all of a sudden was on television and I was on radio and a whole bunch of online things. This was back in 2008. And that's where some of those Broadway stars, NFL coaches, that kind of thing came into it in that very beginning. That's how I met them. And
Mhm.
then I did thousands of readings. And then in 2012, I was in a business course that got led to me from someone else. This is kind of how that went. And in the course, the guy said to me, the leader said, "Are you interested in becoming like a world famous psychic?" And I was like, "No, definitely not. That is not of interest to me." He said, "Well, if you want to move out of that, that is the pathway you're on. And if you don't want to do that, then you're going to have to figure out a way to quantify intuition," which
Mm.
just to me, growing up the way I did, my experience at 18, learning about intuition, which was 30 years ago now, but like all of that led me to relate to intuition as just very practical, which is very, very different than how most people in my industry talk about intuition. I mean, I think you and I have met, I think it was like a year ago, maybe not
Mhm.
quite a year, but we even talked about kind of for me, I relate to it like a soft skill like communication. And so when I went from doing psychic readings to quantifying intuition, what I noticed is I'd be doing readings with people and I would say something to them like in the session. I would say something like, "Well, I mean, I think maybe you kind of weren't paying attention that it was a really terrible idea." And people would say something like, "Ugh, I knew. Hindsight is 2020." And
Right.
like if I had gotten paid like a dollar for every time I heard that, I'd have a boatload of money. I'd be like on a yacht somewhere in the middle of the ocean. Like I heard that a lot. And it sort of inside of me had me realize that not everyone had the benefit of the training I did and the dedication to like dive in and learn it and become good enough at it that you trusted it like
Yeah.
fully and completely. And so that was kind of like in 2014, I was at this thing called the Success Summit. A friend of mine had put together the biggest names you could imagine. So, like John Mackey, Michael Franti, Alanis Morissette, John Gray, the biggest names for like a multi speaker weekend course. And I met all these people, and it sparked something in my awareness that all of these people were honoring the calling that they had, whatever you want to call it. For me,
Mhm.
it was just this passion that people feel at home in themselves and trust themselves and don't make mistakes that are easily avoidable. And that was the big shift. From there, I met some leaders and they hired me. And then it became very, very obvious. Then I started working with primarily mostly business owners and leaders. So that's kind of how I ended up doing what I'm doing now. And in full transparency, I'm going through a rebranding because I'm honing in even more. And this is like all entrepreneurs, whether you're new or not. This is welcome to being an
Yeah,
entrepreneur.
welcome to entrepreneurship. If you're not constantly evolving and changing, then, you must not be truly serious about being an entrepreneur because it's not a static position.
It really isn't. It really isn't. And as a person, I'm dedicated to growth. So it's not surprising that I would do the same in my business. So that's how I ended up specifically doing strategic intuitive leadership work was recognizing that, and this is my real passion, is you like these visionary female leaders and, executives that I work with, I support them. They trust their intuition and their impact grows. So they then fulfill their vision. And some of these women I work with, their vision is, Black and brown women having access to funding. For some of them, it's, a place where women feel safe, where they can, be at home in their own leadership. For some of them, it's, people really being able to be successful and getting the word out about what they're doing in the world. One of our mutual colleagues, really good friend of mine, hers is about making imposter syndrome your superpower.
Mhm.
Like working with women like her, now that she's freed up to trust her intuition, it allows for her to get her real work out in the world. And that is how I ended up right where I'm at right now. So, like I said, it was a circuitous path, but this is where I landed.
Yeah, and I love that because, this is an evolutionary journey. I mean, I started out my entrepreneurial career helping women in midlife reinvent themselves and sort of like trust their own intuition in many ways because I had ignored mine. Sometimes when you're on the treadmill of life and you're addicted to the pattern of the life that you've created, then you put your head in the sand and there's things that that your body knows, that your psyche knows on some level, but you're not paying attention. You're kind of putting it under. And eventually it emerges like you can't continue to tamp down that spark inside of you that is the reason why you're here. And so I would love for you to let's set the stage. So here we are. We're talking to successful women leaders who have carved out a path in corporate. They've got the title, the paycheck, the respect, the accomplishments, and now they have this niggle. That's
Mhm.
my technical term for intuition, right? It's one of my oracle
Like it.
cards. It says trust the niggle. And so now it's a technical term in my vernacular. So they have this feeling, and I point to the center of my chest because that's where I feel it. I'm sure people feel it in different places, that there's something more and if they don't realize it, sometimes the universe conspires to like put you in a position where you have to learn how to listen to yourself, whether that's through a layoff or a career cliff or something like that, where there's no other place for you to go. And it feels very insecure because you're leaving behind the all of the outward trappings of success and now you're staring at a blinking cursor and it's like what do I do now? How do I show up? So how do people number one, recognize their own intuitive capacity. And then how do they learn to start listening to it and being guided by it? I think is the big question.
Yeah. So that first question, which is how do you recognize it? Uh, the way that all of us translate, the way our bodies translate, some people think of intuition as coming from outside of us, but it doesn't. So I think that's probably one of the biggest kind of misconceptions about intuition is we do all of this kind of like research and work about who's talking to me. Is this my great aunt Gertrude who passed away when I was a kid? Is this an angel? Like we try to, map on whatever our spiritual beliefs are to try to figure out where it's coming from. And why that matters is because if you recognize that it's coming from you, then it makes it a little bit easier to trust because it's not coming from anywhere else but like deep inside of you, like you're talking about,
Hmm.
right? So there are four ways that bodies translate intuition. So whoever right now who's listening to this, you've had this experience before because I've trained close to 11,000 people in the 20 years I've been in business. And I've never met anyone who's not had at least a single experience of this. So for some of us, we translate through feeling. That's kind of what you're talking about in the heart. I am not a feeler. I don't translate through feeling. Some people hear something, right? So if you've ever been with somebody that is whip smart, but also like the best BS detector you could imagine, they're probably hearing the truth or the not truth in what someone's saying. Another way our body translates is that we see something, like whole ideas in our head, like a picture of what the solution is. I've seen lots of people do that. Or there's just something that's grabbing our attention. And the last way is that our body just knows, right? It's a knowing is how our body translates. What I find about executive women, especially ones high up on the ladder, almost all of them are knowers, almost every single one. So for years, they just thought they're really bright and smart and don't recognize that some of that knowing that they might like point to their
Mhm.
logic is actually their intuition. It's part of how, like, how did you know that that deal wasn't going to work? How did you know that that was the right person to hire? Maybe not on paper, but in general. How did you know that it was time to go? Didn't have
Yeah.
any evidence, but you just knew that it was
Yeah.
time to go. And that's so we translate one of those four ways. Everybody does. Some people translate all four ways. I do the
Yeah.
feeling part, not as strong, but that. The other half of intuition is just naturally how we're curious. And this, I think, answers more to your second question, which is how do you learn how to use it? How do you learn how to trust it? Um, Intuition is different than logic. I mean, in obvious ways, but here's the not so obvious way. Logic is really good for fixing things. So if what's in front of you is, a flat tire that and you need to fix it, then you know what you need. So you go into your logic and you do what steps there are to do, right? If you need a solution for something that somebody else has found a solution for before. The other night, I could not figure out what temperature to put the oven at for the chicken breast with skin, which I almost never have. And so I
Yeah.
looked it up on the internet. That was a solution, right? I used my logic to search on the internet. And then the last reason is that to be able to and legitimately avoid making a mistake. Like we
Mhm.
need more information. So that's what logic is really, really good for. Intuition is good for totally different things. And this is why it matters to have this conversation is the way that you can trust it is by using it for the thing it really inside of ourselves it's designed for. So intuition is for information, it's for insight, and it's for clarity. What I mean by that is when you are looking at something like starting a business when you've never won one before, you need information not so that you can fix something, find a solution, or avoid messing up, but actually information, deeper information about yourself, about the market.
Yes.
Intuition cuts through junk, like you said, like that feeling in your heart. Sometimes we have way too many options and we need to narrow them down. And we have too much information in that moment, and our logic is messing it up. So, intuition can cut choices down intentionally, like narrow our focus. So, for example, if you're like asking yourself, what's the best place for me to market my business? Is it on stage? Is it, in LinkedIn? Is it Instagram? Is it paid, advertising? Is it blah, 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 whatever it is, networking? And then you have all these choices that all seem good. How do you narrow in on the one that's most in alignment, right? Aligned action, most in alignment in that moment with the results you want to produce. Intuition's good for that. And then the last place that intuition's awesome for is in the moment you're making a decision because it gives insight. So if we're attached or have fear about how it's going to turn out, we will talk ourselves into and out of things, which
Yeah.
we've all done.
Yes, everybody does all the time because, we're all full of fear. I mean, we don't even realize how much fear we're full of. And I love how you described how we feel or we experience intuition in different ways because I've experienced it all different ways. I've sat on the meditation cushion, I've had a vision, I've had a full body lockdown when, I'm supposed to be doing this, but I really don't feel like doing this. Like my body's just not going to go in that direction. And I've also had those little hits of inspiration that
Mhm.
when you don't even pause to really think about them, that's just like that inspiration and goes right to action, that are like these brilliant moments that you never imagined to be true, that you couldn't have thought your way through before. And yet at the same time, I've also and I think other people too have followed their intuition and it hasn't turned out well. And right now we're in this environment where trust has eroded, internal trust and external trust. So as an example, there are a lot of people who have made the decision to leave corporate And because of that feeling of loneliness and not feeling like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't even really know how to trust whether I should do this or that, there's someone that pops up on Instagram or in your email box and they're offering a solution. And so you invest in that solution because you think that's what you need, and it turns out to be not what you need. You don't get the results, and so then you are a little bit poorer for it financially. You've lost trust in the person that made you the promise that didn't deliver, and you're also losing trust in yourself for being discerning enough to choose the right solutions to invest in. So can you help us unpack that a little bit? Because that is the environment that we're in right now where, I've trusted, I got burned, I don't trust them, I don't trust me, I don't trust the process.
Well, I'm going to give you a real life example because I think that that's probably the one that lands most clearly. About 4 years ago, I was in this process of my own business of trying to determine what was next, like in that pivotal moment of
Mhm.
it really felt like, they say like it's pivot, like you have to pivot, right? Market's changing,
Mhm.
desires are changing. It's after 2020. Literally, the market is flooded with coaches,
Yeah.
and I needed to pivot. So I was looking at investing in getting a coach for myself related to marketing. And so I invested a pretty penny in something. What was at the center of my choice was not curiosity and a desire to grow. It was desperation for doing it the right way. So, no
Mhm.
surprise that desperation and really the fear of doing it the wrong way drove that decision, not my intuition. And so, unfortunately, I spent $12,000 on a program that it did teach me some things, but it didn't have the desired result I wanted because when I was in that feeling, what was driving it is like something is wrong. I need to fix it. I can feel something was off. That was my intuition, but the solution was not driven to connect what would be that fit for what was next. How could I innovate? Instead, it was, how can I fix this feeling? How can I make this better? Does that make sense? And so,
Yeah, it really does. And in many ways, the sales process for selling coaching services exacerbates that feeling of
absolutely.
panic, not feeling good enough, not knowing what to do. And there's a lot of coaches that aren't discerning on whether or not that's the right person to really benefit from their program. And so there's just, some lack of professionalism, and also the judgment factor is really clouded. So
What
in a case like
Yeah.
that, and let's say our listeners have been in that boat, I haven't met anyone who hasn't felt at least once that they made an investment to support themselves in growing their business and didn't get it. So what do you do? How do you recover? How do you make smarter, more aligned decisions going forward?
Well, first you give yourself some grace. Like, really. So if this
Yeah.
is if you're listening right now and you're, like, licking your wounds after feeling like you wasted, $18,000 on a program, like, take a deep breath and recognize that part of being in business is investing and learning, and whatever it was you learned from that, you won't do it again. Because what I did, that choice I made, I won't ever do that again. I had to recognize that I made that choice from desperation. So that's, like, the very first thing I would say, some grace for yourself.
Mhm.
And then the restoration of trust in yourself, here's the thing. And this is not, I wish it was some simple answer. This is complex, right? Because we're complex. So, what I would say is look at for yourself, one, really what is the outcome you desire? Not what's the result, but what's the outcome?
Mhm.
Like, like a little bit farther out than the end of the year. Because what I say happens for all business owners. It happened for me. I've talked to other business owners. And I've even talked to people. This is all of life. What happens is there's that divine, whatever you want to call it, inspired moment, right? What had you leave corporate or what had you start your business? The moment you go from inspired moment to action in the how sparks your logic. And logic should come in your decision making, but it should come in after you are really, really, really clear what you desire. So
Mhm.
you stay in that space of inspiration so that you can connect to what I would call the physical sensation, the emotional sensation, and the mental space between your ears of what a yes is. Because I think sometimes what happens is we choose a lot of maybes. Because when I look back, in all honesty, and that was what it taught me, when I chose that that program, I chose a maybe because maybe felt better than a no. And where I was in my business in that moment was a no. I couldn't find my way to what a yes was because I was asking the wrong question. So to say it kind of in a more bullet point way so people can remember this later, it's number one, identify for yourself what is it that you actually want. Go back to that moment of inspiration for why you started your business in the first place. See if you can find your being there, not in the result of like, I'm making this much. I don't have to put up with the junk I put up with in corporate, but like the inspired experience in your being of why you started. Get yourself back to there
Mhm.
and recognize that as a yes. What
Mhm.
physical sensations are in your body that are a yes? What's happening between your ears? The mood, right? What are your thoughts? They're positive, they're excited, they're curious. And then what emotions are present? You feel maybe peaceful, you feel exuberant, you feel joyful, you feel quiet, whatever that is, and recognize that as a yes. And then when you're looking forward to go, what options could support the fulfillment of that? Anything that does not show up as that experience in the body, in your mood, in the emotion is a no, and trust it. And you can do some practices. I've had people like, if you're looking at hiring, let's say, a fractional CEO for your growing organization, or you're just getting a VA, right? You're just getting started. Before you hire anyone, get yourself back to that space of inspiration for when you started your business. Get that yes, get that energy of yes in your body, and then ask yourself, does hiring a VA in this moment, is it aligned with the fulfillment of that? And if what comes back is not that feeling in the body, it's just a no.
Mhm.
And trust that. You're going to have to keep trusting it. And we're human. So we've made decisions in a particular way for years, right? They say that all habits are formed before we're 7 in our basal ganglia.
Mhm.
I'm obsessed with brain science. And if you want to build a new habit, which is being an intuitive decision maker, it will require understanding how you make decisions and where to insert that intuitive part because it is adopting a new habit. So to me, before you start signing a contract, before you hit buy, right? Before you make the final decision, I think the easiest place to insert intuitive decision making is right at the end because it's really
Mhm.
clear in that moment if it's a yes or if it's like I don't, hesitation is a no.
Yeah, and, sometimes, even if it's a financial stretch for you, when it's a hell yes in your body, there's no fear about the finances. And I want to talk about intuition in light of resistance and fear. Right?
Mm,
Because so how do you discern, is this my intuition telling me not to go this direction? Or is it resistance, which is a form of fear that, it's just new. I've never done it before. It feels uncomfortable. So let's not use intuition as an excuse to hold yourself back from stepping into a bigger version of yourself. Does that make
Great
sense?
point. That absolutely great point. Because we've all done that where if we had been able to hear our intuition over our fear, it would have been telling us to go ahead and go for it anyway, but then we didn't. Yeah, I agree. I would say this, which is that there is for most people, when they're becoming an intuitive decision maker, they're relating it like that moment where you know or feel something and that is unreliable. So, if you want to be a better communicator, you read books about communication, you practice, maybe you get a therapist, you get someone who can help
Mhm.
you understand what's missing from your communication. If you want to be an intuitive decision maker, what you need to begin to do is practice making decisions intuitively. So, what that looks like is not waiting for the awareness to show up, but use tools. So, for example, I have a lot of clients who do a lot of different things and they're all built differently. So different tools work better. But as I was saying a moment ago, like the moment where you're doing a yes or no, that tool is called body as a pendulum.
Mhm.
So it's practicing the tool so that it becomes second nature. It's you can think of lots of examples where we learn new things, but the one that most people learn is riding a bike, right?
Mhm.
So there's a moment when you get balance and you never not get balance again. Like you have balance forever then. And there's something that happens in our body's understanding of it, and then we can ride a bike. But then you go from a bicycle to a unicycle, you got to learn balance again, right? And so this is not any different. So we all understand, most people, especially women who listen to your podcast, understand that intuition exists, but using it intentionally to drive decisions that are in alignment with who you are is slightly different. So maybe you do, and maybe you recognize when things come in that feel different than your thoughts or different than what you already know. But this is a practice of intentionally using it so that you can tell the difference between like what you're saying, fear, you know, discernment to me is a funny word, because sometimes people hear that and they think it's like choosing between what they know and then the unknown and relying on what they know to make a smart decision. And to
Mhm.
me, intuition is not about choosing the right thing, because that's not what intuition is about. That's what logic is for, right? Like, you don't wanna put the wrong size tire on your car. You don't
Mhm.
wanna hire a general contractor when all you need is someone to paint your house, right? It's like, there are places where we need it. So to me, intuition is really extraordinary for those places in decision making where you need to think outside of what you know. So I tend to believe that if you want to be able to tell the difference between resistance and fear, like resistance, like it's an intuitive, expression, and fear, the best way to do that is to practice. Practice, 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 practice. And that looks like finding tools that work for you and applying it to your decision making process so you can trust yourself. The simplest thing I always say is before you say yes to any decision, and this is brain science, by the way, not intuition. There's this thing that happens in our brain where it clicks, right? They call it click and whir in the book Influenced by Robert Cialdini, where we're not making a decision aligned with ourselves. We're reacting to a lever of influence, which is what he talks about in that book. So anytime you're considering something, tell somebody, I need to think about it overnight, because the space from that decision lessens that intensity of using your discernment in that moment. That's like the best recommendation I can ever give. And
Mhm.
sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes you do actually have to make a decision in the moment. And if you are in that space, then my recommendation is to use that tool, body as a pendulum.
Yeah. And in this current climate, in the society that we're in right now, a lot of people, tend to overthink.
Oh,
And so the I need to think about it turns more into, the unconscious, the amygdala hijack of, oh my God, are you serious? Are you thinking about doing this? Are you crazy, for investing that amount of money? Are you sure you're going to be able to do it? Can you trust yourself? So how do you learn to not overthink and trust yourself in this intuitive decision making process?
oh my goodness. This
And
is like,
I'm
this
realizing
is
that,
such a
we're
I'm like,
going on
oh
and
my
on
gosh,
here.
Deb, this is such a deep question. Okay, I'm as an overthinker, welcome. If you're an overthinker, we're family. So I am like the world's biggest overthinker. When I notice that I can't let go of something, then I know I'm not in my body anymore. I am in my head. So I highly, highly recommend to people that before you try using your intuition or even examining what you know, you have to get from your head and into your body. Period. The end. What does that look like? Well, everybody has different ways of calming their mind. I was just saying this to a client yesterday who's a high level, she owns her own organization. And I was saying, for some of us, we need to move our body, like physical movement. And if you are intensely overthinking, then have the movement be intensely the same. Like go run, go walk really, really, really far, lift really heavy weights, get your mind quiet. For some people, being creative gets their mind quiet. You can go cook. I have a client, he likes to do that. I have another client, she paints. It may be meditating. You just mentioned meditation. For some people, that really works. I'm going to be honest, it does not work for me when I'm overthinking. I actually have to move my body. It's the only way for me to get back into my, the center of my body. So that's my recommendation. If you
Yeah.
are overthinking, you've probably gathered too much information because now we even have, AI that does even more thinking and gathering information for goodness gracious sake. So if you find yourself going like, well, maybe I need to do a little more research and your mind is like, stop all action and do what I call pause. Take a pause, step away from it for a minute, go move your body, go do something creative, go be in nature, go read a book, go take a bubble bath, whatever the thing is that quiets your mind, go do that thing, get back in your body, then come back to the decision at hand and see if you can bring yourself back to that inspired moment for you. That's a yes. What I like to say is it can be a place, a person, or a thing that when you think of it, it just like brings a smile to your face. Your body feels really, really good. It makes you happy. That's a yes in your body or a heck yeah, right? Like listen for that. Then from there, ask the question, this thing that I'm considering, is it in alignment with who I am? And if what you get is not that same feeling as that inspired moment or that person, place, or thing that just helps you relax into your body, it's a no. It's a no. It doesn't matter if it costs almost nothing. It doesn't matter if it costs a lot of money. If it's in alignment and it's a yes, do it. And if it's out of alignment, don't. You can in fact trust your intuition. Now, here's the part that people are going to argue with, which I don't mind about. Like, it's okay. Be a little controversial, makes things interesting. I can't tell you where intuition's coming from. I can tell you what I think after training all the people I've had, but I don't totally know. We could have a conversation about it and probably a disagreement because some people's spiritual beliefs think it's like, angels, universe, we're tapping into the magnetic, blah, blah. I don't
The
know. Who knows?
download.
Right. Whatever the belief is, here's what I know. Our brain is scanning the outside environment all the time because our brain is designed as a computer, right? The front and back, the whole entire thing. Some part of it, the design is to keep us safe, but it's also just to categorize information into piles of safe, unsafe, and then known and unknown. That's what our brain is doing all the time. When you are looking at a potential, let's say, program to take or something, or working with someone or hiring someone, your brain is scanned information that you don't consciously remember because it literally is scanning millions of bits of information at all moments. So your intuition cuts through extraneous information. And it's kind of like if you ever saw that movie, which I love, The Limitless, where he took the pill. I sometimes was like, that is what intuition does. It helps you go back to the things that are in your brain, but you don't consciously remember them. So
Yeah.
that's the power of intuition. You can be considering something, tap into your intuition, and it can cut through everything and it can remind you of a conversation you had with that person that you had forgotten about, where they told you about one of their clients that was really related to you and you're like, oh, I could just talk to that person and see what they got out of doing this work with them. It'd be okay if I did that. I will say, and again, like I said, some people would not agree with me. Intuition is our brain's design. It is designed to scan the environment. And if we're able to quiet like our computing brain, how it's piling things,
Mhm.
if we can quiet it down enough, we can, in fact, hear our quieter inner wisdom. And to me, wisdom is that combination of what you know, but may not be consciously aware of, and that which you do consciously know. And when those two things come together, that is really wisdom. So intuition does not need to be separated from, our logic. However, if you're leaning on logic only, you are making mistakes that are really avoidable. You're also probably thinking about things too much.
Yeah, probably, almost guaranteed. Shoshana, I could go on and on and on. I mean, this is a fascinating conversation. I mean, I geek out on mind science as well. And, but I want to get really practical for our listeners. And that
Yeah.
is, this sounds like something they need to experience with you. So how do they go about doing that? How can people get in touch with you or learn from you? Um, tell us all the things.
Yeah. So the best thing to do is to do a strategic intuitive consultation with me. It's a 60 to 90-minute conversation where we dive into whatever one thing, maybe, or two things you're dealing with in business. And either we use my intuition, which I've been training for 30 years. That's super helpful to have someone who has 20 years of business acumen and 30 years of experience in intuition, or I can train you how to use yours. So
Mm.
if you've been trying to use it and having a real failure to understand what it's communicating to you, then we can do that. For any of your listeners today, if they reach out to me, I would happily give them a discount on a very first one. So they just need to mention your podcast.
That sounds great. And we will put that link in show notes so that it's easily accessible. And yeah, so now is a time where, for a variety of reasons, and I'm sure it's always this time, but it feels just whenever the external barometric pressure gets more and more intense, like it feels right now in
Yes.
where we are in the world, that coming from that place of intuitive knowing is just more important. You can't survive entrepreneurship on logic alone. And you're probably doing it in some form or fashion and not recognizing it. And so that's number one, is identifying where that's coming up for you and where it's working for you, and where overthinking may not. And so thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with our listeners here today.
Thank you. I love what you do. I love that you help women who have something to give the world, help them be able to do that.
Yeah, and figuring out what that gift is, because
Yep.
sometimes we have a very, very narrow vision of, oh, it's my last credential or it's my last degree. It's not. It's
Oh,
about your entire lifetime experience, and whether that was in or outside of corporate, and the reason why you're here. And to discover that is an intuitive process.
right.
So
It
we'll
is. I
leave you
love
there,
that.
my
Life
friend.
after corporate. There is one.
There is one, absolutely. So we'll leave you there, my friends. Thank you so much for listening to our show. And if this particular interview delighted you, we would be absolutely over the moon if you would subscribe, leave us a rating, leave us a review, and come back next week for more exciting, insightful, um, practical things that you can do or learn to move you and your business forward. So thank you so much. We'll see you next week.